Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm your host, Randy Johnston, with co-host Brian Tankersley. And we thought it was time to talk small business accounting systems again, because many of you are looking at the impact of client accounting systems. And with the announcements on June 26th of Intuit with their agentic AI and some of the implications of that, plus the inability to opt out of AI in the QuickBooks Online platform, that's given a number of practitioners pause for the moment. Now, because of that, we know that many of your client accounting services practices are focusing on smaller businesses. Now, you can use larger tools like Sage Intacct or Soft Ledger or Dual Entry to get that work done, but many of you will and are looking for replacement systems. Then you've got mainstream players like Xero and Zoho Books, or Iris's Accountants World Accounting Power, which have all been competitors. But we thought it was worth in making sure you knew of many new competitors. So I'm going to name them quickly, and then Brian let you react on some of these. But for example, deployed in my clients today, I have Basis AI, Digits AI Accounting is in full release. Of course, Light by Atomico is out. You've got Puzzle.io, which Brian spent quite a bit of time with those folks at Scaling New Heights. You've got Rillet, and, I'm sure we are missing some that could be used for client accounting services. But when we taught this concept in 2024, we only named 4 probable systems that could be used for CAS. One of those was the not-for-profit specialty tool of Aplos. But the list now is quite long. And in fact, just to give you a flavor, I've got 14 products in front of Brian and I right now. And if you're listening, you can, see the transcript and you'll hear about these different products as well. But if you're on the video version of this, you can actually see the product names, and it's like, what's a Rillet? What's a dual entry? Those would be kind of foreign. Now, there are some desktop hosted products you could use for CAS, AccountEdge, Sima, QuickBooks Enterprise, which has a relatively short life left, Sage 50, Inspire systems. Those would be a little stronger options, but oh my, so much change. So, Brian, what do you think our listeners need to know about some of these systems? And, I've got a couple that I'll pick on, but you can pick on the ones you'd like to mention.
Digits seem to be the belle of the ball at Scaling New Heights, and they had, they seem to have quite a bit of interesting things going on there with them. I would just generally say that these ones that you're hearing of the first time, I think you've got to be very careful with them and not bet the entire farm on them. Okay, because there are a lot of, my experience with looking at new accounting softwares is that I've reviewed most of them when they were new, and then I've gone back and reviewed them a few years later. And there is a concept in startups called a minimum viable product, where somebody releases something that is the bare bones, and then they iterate and make it better. The classic example I would think of would be, if you go back 15 years, FreshBooks. Okay. FreshBooks came out, it was a single entry system at the time. It's now a full double entry system. It's strong, it's got everything, but it took a number of years for it to grow into adulthood and be ready for multiple clients in multiple industries in an accounting practice where you can get things done quickly. I think that there are a lot of interesting things here. I think you need to be trying at least one of these new ones out at some level. Maybe one client, maybe 2 clients. I think you need to, or maybe you just try the firm's account with it. I don't know. But I think we need to start dabbling here, because I feel like we're on the precipice of some innovation in productivity, especially surrounding bill entry, bill classification, and again, account reconciliation in some of these applications.
So to that point, Brian, I think you're spot on. And if we look at what has evolved with Jeff Siebert's Digits product, he has taken that from he and his team have taken it from a reporting tool to a full AI accounting tool. And that's kind of a big deal. And the classifications in there are amazingly accurate. Now, just to give you pricing, again, we try not to give pricing for companies, but the charge is $100 per month per company. And that includes all of the auto classification pieces. And when I consider labor, if you think about all of the transactions that would arrive for a client or your own business or firm, how much labor can you buy for $100? And pick your cost basis, whether it's $50 or $33 an hour, or whatever. So it's 2 or 3 hours ish. But the capability and accuracy of the platform seems quite good. So playing with the platform makes good sense. Another development on Digits is former CTO of Zero, Craig Walker, joined Digits here in the past 30 days or so.
I'm
Now,
glad he's storming Craig Walker back into space. He's a giant, and having him there gives them a huge amount of credibility, as does their strategic advisor Casey Johnson, that's our friend of ours.
yeah, and it turns out that Craig had been kind of out of the accounting profession since he really enjoyed his exit from Zero, which was good. But, the capabilities of Craig against this platform, I think will, I'll say have an adult in the room. Now, the other one, Brian, that besides Digits that you got exposure to was Puzzle. Now, what would you like the listeners to know about Puzzle?
I think generally we've got to just kind of consider these things new products. Okay, I think that they are new products, and I think they're worth exploring. I haven't run any transactions through Puzzle, so I'm not really ready to make any conclusions as of yet. But I would say generally that with these things, everybody's got a good dog and pony that I've seen that we put on this list. Okay. Everybody's got a good show. They've got a good PowerPoint. Okay. But in my mind, especially in small business accounting, especially in CAS, the rubber meets the road when you start putting your own transactions into it, and then you have to put in a payroll. Okay. Because I think most of these are not doing payroll. They're using outside services for payroll. So payroll is going to be an interface or an upload. And so this, I think generally I'm going to stick with, rather than give my first impressions right now, I'm going to stick with the Missouri approach that they're going to have to show me before I really opine much. But I will say that I am intrigued by what I've seen, and I think it's going to be interesting when I get some time to run transactions through to see what those observations are, because I'm expecting good results based on what I've seen.
Understood. Well, one more that I want to call out, and again, you may want to join the wait list on this, is Basis. Now, Matthew Harp and Mitch Trinovsky have built a very interesting system that I have deployed in some clients, and the results so far are quite good. Now, the concept of Basis is to optimize the processing of transactions. It's far beyond rapid close, but there's classification and, wrapping around QuickBooks Online and Sage Intacct and doing fancy reporting and lots of other things. That platform shows magnificent promise for optimizing CAS practices, just like many of you have been looking for workflow control tools, and many of you have landed on Keeper as an example. When we look at the workflow options, which typically include Arrow Workflow or Jetpack Workflow or Carbon or Keeper, those tools are getting the job done, but you're looking for something more. Basis might be your something more. So, Brian, if you could show the next slide, I think you've got them down right now. But if you could show the small business products next.
Okay. And so again, we've listed out here quite a few items in there, but there are new ones on this list that we haven't had before. Momentio, OneUp, ZipBooks are three in the SaaS area that show up. We also have, with more sophistication, the custom books product that we're big fans of. Clivity Account Edge is still around, believe it or not. A Soft Ledger is another one that's interesting. That seems like a good one for people that are graduating from QuickBooks, or maybe graduating from QuickBooks Enterprise because they're tired of paying more for not much innovation.
And
Spires.
before you leave Soft Ledger, I think Ben Taylor and Jeff Ostrega have done a beautiful job there. And if you have multi-entity needs, typically I am referring Soft Ledger and X Ledger very, very frequently, and dual entry. Those three seem to be the up and comers that could displace QuickBooks Enterprise. And I know a lot of you have got a fairly large installed base on QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Enterprise, and you've looked at the capabilities inside QBO and said, I can't take these clients there. I got to find a new landing zone.
But I don't want to have omitted from that list Zoho. Okay, I think Zoho Books is a very viable competitor there. They're not doing multi-company as of yet, but it is on their roadmap in the short term. I think the thing that's so interesting with Zoho is the whole finance suite. They have 50 state payroll now. They have the expense tool. They have a tool for managing subscriptions, which is a common way that people are doing recurring revenue businesses today. You've got a lot of things like that going for Zoho, plus all the automation, plus the Zoho analytics tool, plus the integration platform as a service there with Zoho Flow. And I think, I think in addition to those, I think Zoho is, I think we'd be derelict if we didn't call Zoho out very specifically because of the platform's flexibility and the ability to use the platform for literally everything.
Yeah, and you are spot on that, because Cynthia Rajan, who is the global head of marketing for Zoho Books and Zoho Practice, we've had the pleasure of meeting in the last few weeks. And frankly, she did a beautiful job of a seminar with Dext the week that we recorded this particular podcast. But, the whole capability of Zoho Books, plus payroll, plus all the modules, if you do Zoho One, which is the way I'd like to have you do it, is really exceptionally good. And then call this maybe a bit of an endorsement, but for most small business clients that have come to me asking for recommendations, almost universally, I've started them on Zoho One and Zoho Books in specific. And Brian, you would have no reason to know this, but I did consulting work this week with a firm that is all Zoho One based, and they're big firm. And I will tell you more about it, when we're offline. But bottom line was, this firm was producing 15,000 tax returns with 1,000 plus CAS clients on Zoho. And it's like, okay, cool for you. So just be aware that it is very capable. And we're aware of another firm in Tennessee running 1,000 plus client accounting services clients on Zoho. So you're absolutely correct in calling that out. If you look at our list of recommendations for client accounting services a year ago, if it was SaaS, it was QuickBooks Online, it was Zoho, it was Xero, it was Aplos,
FreshBooks.
and FreshBooks. That's kind of what it was. And now you can hear why we thought it was important to pull these out, because if you're not seeing the video version of this, in small business products, we've got 20, really 21 if you want to count the two Sage 50s listed, and on CAS we had about 20 also. So, we're talking a marketplace of 40 potential products. Now, not to be distracted, but also remember that upmarket and the mid-market are even more products. And again, here we would suggest that there are some new players that are quite stunningly good, a collection of about 20 products that are probably more at the QuickBooks Enterprise and above level, but even players that have been advertising heavily like Odoo and others that we've got a long history with like Acumatic or Dynamics 365 Business Central or Sage Intacct or NetSuite all fall on here. And I think Zoho Books is strong enough that it can hold its own even in this area. But, another 20. So my old rule of thumb, friends, was there's roughly 300 products being sold in the US market. 4 or 5 companies own about 50 apiece. Sage owns, about that many. Epicor owns about that many. Infor owns about that many, and so forth. But for our small businesses, the options have just exploded, and many of the new general ledgers are AI-based general ledgers. And there's more that we're aware of, but they're so juvenile. I don't even want to have you looking at them yet because I just don't think they're ready for prime time.
And the interesting thing with some of the new competitors is they're adding e-commerce integrations, they're adding integrations into CRM and other line of business management tools. And so we're really moving very rapidly toward the enterprise architecture world that the enterprises have been in for 20 years, where everything has some kind of integration. So you enter data once and it goes in, or the data gets harvested through AI and you never enter it. But the days of entering things more than once into disparate systems should be coming to a close, if not over, for you at this point. And so that's a major trend that we're seeing with these things. NetSuite has had, I'll call them out because they've had integrated CRM accounting and e-commerce for decades, for quite a while. But there are more people coming to this integration thing either through tools that integrate directly or through third-party integration tools like Zapier, I don't know how to pronounce that word, that ZAPIER company that does the integration, or Power Automate or Zoho Flow. So I think it's really more about looking at your business processes and figuring out how you can digitize those for many of our mid-market friends. Also, don't forget that with robotic process automation, you can take data out of your legacy systems and work with these. So if you're stuck with a legacy system, like, let's say a Sage 100 that you've had forever, one of the things you can still do is you can use Power Query to ingest data that's stored on your network and then put it into kind of a data mart. You can you can use you can use Power Automate. You can use robotic process automation tools, and there are a zillion of those out there to get the data in and out of these legacy systems. Okay, I think the trend that I'm seeing generally in mid market is more on the business process automation and creating the integration, however you have to. And again, what we can do once we get these things created with RPA is we can then design the new systems on a new platform when you switch platforms, and keep much of the front end the same for the users, so it requires less training and you get superior integration. But again, this integration and again, cloud-based stuff is really important. But I want to make sure you don't forget about RPA and the automation, because that's where you're gonna make these things make sense.
Well, a year ago at this time, we were talking about Digits as an example, as an AI powered reporting tool. And we probably could have produced a whole nother session on AI reporting. So things like clockwork.ai would have fallen in that, and Giraffe has some of that. And again, I could list, many. But our basic conclusion is that automation and AI is likely to drive more advisory work if you want to take it. And we probably could have said the same thing in the tax session for you. But with CAS in particular, we note that tools like For Impact Data, which we've recorded a podcast on, or ADER, which we've recorded a podcast on, are definitely, you know, candidates in that particular world. So, but we want to make you also aware of some other advisory tools that have, come into being. And while we can automate more with, makershub.ai or BotKeeper or those types of products, we also have some interesting new reporting tools and advisory tools. So here, for example, the old Lease Crunch company who bought Finagraph has renamed themselves to Crunchify, and they are releasing advisory tools and uh, strategies for you to deliver advisory services. The Audit Site folks, the first week of July, released a product called the Management Meeting Module, and it allows you to offer multiple different types of services for transaction automation, so transaction advisory services. And for example, they can do an automatic cash proof to prove quality of earnings with an automated tool. And, if you've got a chain of, let's say, 100 fast food restaurants, are you better off selling all 100 at once? Are you better off, blocking them up in 2 or 3 chunks, which are most profitable and so forth? And with their tool, you can quickly prove that out. And a lot of the private equity people are looking for the same type of, proof of quality of earnings, including a reporting tool. Brian, you and I discovered at AICP Engage called Daniel with Jonas Drupal, who is the founder there from New York, was a very interesting type of tool. So again, when it comes to reporting and advisory, many, many options, but you've got some tools that have AI in them, like For Impact Data, that you could hook to QuickBooks Online clients and immediately discover advisory opportunities in ways that you might not otherwise perceive.
Now, don't forget about Zoho Analytics. Don't forget about Power BI. These BI tools have a role in here. However, we see when it comes to advisory, we see those BI tools being used more with the operational systems and the operational data on a day-to-day basis in near real time. And that's a key piece that we have. And one of the critical challenges for this is that, you can't do advisory if you don't know what you're doing in that industry. And so that means you need to have a significant amount of experience, significant number of clients in that area. You can't be one of these people that takes a compass and draws a 30-mile radius around their office and says anybody that has a business in this area is eligible to be my client. I think we really, for advisory, we really have to become more like a boutique, and that's a move that some of you have made and some of you have not. And so, again, the longer you put that off, the harder it's going to be for you to get into doing good advisory in this area.
And, when you think about KPIs surfaced by Power BI, that is one of the things I like about For Impact Data. It is a Power BI tool that does both financial and operational metrics and does them automatically for you, and then helps you understand where you have opportunities with the clients. So what we were trying to accomplish with this session was just to make you aware of how many client accounting services tools are surfacing. And we didn't even touch on the AI powered workflow tools or any of the management tools around that. It was just the accounting software and a little bit of advisory. So, Brian, any other parting thoughts for our listeners today?
I think we're living in a period where there's a huge amount of innovation taking place. And I think if you're using the same products that you implemented right before Y2K, it's time to look around and see what's going on. Okay, because there's a lot of interesting innovation in here, and the world is changing rapidly because of AI. And if you don't change, you may be left behind the way the people that smoked at their desk and swore by their 5, 7, and 14 column were when things got computerized. I think AI is going to have big changes. The processes are going to change. The amount of labor it takes is going to change. And again, we're really switching to being more digital plumbers and less water carriers now. And so we're going to have to change skills. And in many cases, we're going to have to skill up in areas to be effective here. So you could say it's the best of times, it's the worst of times, I guess.
Well, we appreciate you listening in, and we'll talk to you again soon in another Accounting Technology Lab. Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.